It's truly amazing if you think about it that after 2,000 years now, the name of Jesus is still so widely known that from the littlest child to the oldest person, the very mention of it perks up our ears. And yet at the same time, how bizarre it is that the reality of Jesus remains so strange when it comes to our own individual lives. Despite all of the institutions and the churches that are named after him, in spite of all of the many ways that he gets celebrated on the cover of books and magazines, so many of us live our lives largely unaware of him so much of the year. We seem deafened to what we heard about him. We seem to struggle to apply the teachings that he has given to us. We manage to go about as if his life really had a lot to do with the holidays, but not much to do with our day-to-days. And yet somehow at Christmas time, we seem to find a capacity to hear just a little bit better what he's trying to say to us, trying to do in us. It's as if some deep chord within us begins to vibrate again to a song that can never be silenced, to a chorus of hope deep inside of us that all of us somehow still long to sing. What child is this? The carol asks. And who do you say that I am? The child himself would later query. I think that the Christmas carols and the lessons that we read this time of year beg us to rediscover for ourselves that answer. We all love the great songs of this season, and we sing them year after year. Perhaps so frequently we can mouth the words without even having the cheat sheet up on the screen. I know for me that I hear the story so often it can sometimes grow a bit numb to me. I find I can lose a sense of awareness of the deep meaning at the heart of the music. And knowing that that might be true not just for me, but for others of us tonight, I thought I might try and tell us the story in a different way. I want to share with you a tale that can help us get to the heart of what happened at Christmas and reawaken in us, perhaps, a sense of the wonder of what God did on this day. Once upon a time, in a remote Swiss village, there stood a very beautiful church. And from miles around, people used to come to join in the glorious worship and singing that took place in that mountain valley cathedral. No other building in the land had an organ like the one that beat as the heart of that particular place. And in the right hands, that organ could produce music that lifted souls to God and bound them together in joyful harmony. It could ring out chords that were so mighty and true that the very stones of the building themselves seemed to tremble with awe before the glory and splendor of who God is. That instrument would play the melody of God's grace so sweetly that those who heard it were moved as they left the building to go forth in acts of honor and service. But all of that was long ago. Nothing like that ushered from those pipes anymore. For you see, something had gone terribly wrong with that instrument at some point. Oh, it still played in a way, I suppose, but somehow the music just wasn't the same. The tones weren't anywhere near as rich anymore. The harmonies just weren't there. The air supply grew weaker and weaker and weaker as the villagers began to call out for help. As time went on, musicians and technicians and experts of every kind were called to come to that village to ply their trade and knowledge upon that old organ. And with the arrival of each of those new authorities, the hopes of the villagers would start to soar again, only to be dashed when nothing really changed or when one of those experts actually succeeded in making the music even worse. After a while, people simply got used to the sound of second-rate music. Fewer and fewer of the people even remembered what it had once sounded like, and looked upon the old ones who talked so sentimentally about the music of the past as if they were just crazy. And in time, there was no music at all. And the life of the cathedral slowly ebbed away till all that was left was a hollow shell where once such glory had rung. Then again, sometimes it's in the midst of the hollow and dark and silent places of our lives that the light of God comes to shine, and the glory of God and His grace sounds most brightly. In fact, I'm told that it wasn't actually until the organ in a little Austrian church became so damaged by mice that it would no longer play that on Christmas Eve in the year 1818, the pastor and the organist collaborated to create a new song that we've come to know and to love so very well. I suppose it was in a similar kind of fashion that on one very dark and silent December night, a strange presence suddenly arrived at the door of the empty cathedral. The stranger said that he'd come down from the great mountains above. He'd come to visit the village, and he asked the church custodian if he'd let him in. "Oh, it's after hours," the custodian responded. He eyed the tattered clothes of the traveler and repeated it. No, I don't think it's appropriate right now. Actually, besides, there's really nothing here to see or to listen to in this place anymore." But the custodian's child, who was also standing there, she looked with a different set of eyes upon the figure of the stranger. She saw past the rags and saw something in the stranger's eyes that seemed oh so warm and so wise. "Please, Daddy," she said, "please, let him in. Let him in." And looking down at his daughter's bright eyes, the custodian softened a bit. "Oh, I guess it's all right," he said. "It's cold outside. You can sleep in the church, but just for tonight, just for tonight." Long ago, Jesus said, "Whenever you give care to one of the least of my brothers and sisters, you care for me." It's as if you're welcoming me in. And those like that custodian's child who have the vision to do that often discover for themselves that when they open the doors of their hearts to others, God surprises them with blessings for themselves they would not ever have expected, more than they even know how to contain. And so as the ushers come forward now to receive our Christmas offering, you and I have the chance to experience something of that truth for ourselves, something of the light in the eye of that little child. Because the generosity that we sow here, the generosity that we show here, is going to bear fruit in the lives of thousands upon thousands of other people in the days to come. So would you please join me in following the example of that little girl and in honoring Jesus as we extend grace to those brothers and sisters that Jesus loves on this holy night. It was just past midnight when the custodian awoke with a start from what had been a very sound sleep. And at first, he thought he must still be dreaming because he could swear he could hear the unmistakable but impossible sound of pipe organ music. Not the kind of sound that comes from a broken down old instrument, but instead music so utterly magnificent, so sweet and soaring and splendid that it made him want to laugh and sing and pray and cry all at the same time. And it was coming from the cathedral. So pulling on his boots and his coat and tromping out through the snow towards the cathedral, he saw torches headed that way from every conceivable directions as hundreds of people, shepherds and farmers and merchants and children, were all being drawn by the sound of that amazing music now filling up the night. As the townspeople threw open the doors of the great cathedral, they found it ablaze with the light of so many candles and such staggering sound that it filled the void with glory. And there, at the bench of the organ itself, playing with a passion and a genius beyond compare, sat the figure of a stranger, of the stranger, the one who wore the rags of a carpenter, but the heir of a king. Who was he? Mary, did you know? As the strains of the music echoed off of the stones in that ancient place, the custodian made his way down the aisle and up to the organ and posed to the stranger, to the presence there, the question that was on every single person's mind. "Who are you, sir?" he asked. "Who are you?" And the stranger paused and sat back and gently replied, "My name is Gott." No, said the custodian. You're misunderstanding. I mean, who are you? I mean, how did you do this? I mean, how could you repair what none of the experts were able to repair? That's what we want to understand. And without saying a word, the traveler simply leaned over the keyboard and went, whew, and then sat back. And the custodian leaned forward himself, and straining in the candlelight to see what was there, his eyes began to finally focus, and then he saw it. It was above the lowest of the keyboards on a wooden panel where the stranger had blown away the dust of the decades. He saw it there, a little brass plaque, and on it were inscribed just 3 words: built by God. Many years ago, said the presence kindly, I built this organ with my own hands. And I made it for a very glorious purpose. And now I have come to make it to sing again. I know that I'm in the company of intelligent people, and you can put these ideas together for yourself. I think you understand that in a far greater sense, the story I've been telling you tonight is the story at the heart of Christmas. It is the story of the God who came down from the great mountain into the village of humanity to do in us what we had lost the ability to do for ourselves, what perhaps we could never have done for ourselves, to address a need that each of us so desperately has. In the person of Jesus Christ, God came down from heaven to restore the glorious instrument of humanity that God himself once made. He came to repair the damage that all of the rust of sin and the dust of death has done upon us. He came to breathe fresh wind through the pipes of our souls, to play the melody of his truth and his grace through our hearts and our minds till they resound again with his glorious song, this song for which we're made. I don't think I need to tell any of you that we're just not playing the music of life in the way that we want to see it played. We know in the deepest part of us that the sagging stock market is the least of our problems. It doesn't begin to get close to what our deepest needs truly are. There is disharmony between people and parties today, between neighbors and nations, sometimes within our own families. So much pain and conflict and division. It's worth crying about. I understand. Fear and anger and addiction and hurt and grief are not just words out there. They're things we know about in our own life stories. They've corroded the connections in many of the important relationships of our lives, leaving our lives in so many ways off key. And there are cracks in the pipe of our personality. Just ask the people we live with. There are the exhausting pace of the days that we live leave us without enough breath in our souls to sing. Some of us have played solo for so long, we think there's no other way to do our lives. And we wonder if this emptiness or this loneliness that we sometimes feel deep within isn't written permanently and irretrievably into the score of our life. Most of us have grown so used to tapping to the music and the tunes of the society around us that we've forgotten that there is actually a far more beautiful medley and melody that God made us to play. And in this light, all of us have this precious choice to make. We can just let the organ of our hearts keep playing, just as it is. We can go out from here tonight just determined to keep at it, just trying to pull out all the stops that we know how to, replacing a pipe here or there when there's a little need that we see. We can try and upgrade the instrument by our own efforts alone. We can put our faith in the great wind chests of Wall Street or Washington, or seek the advice of the experts on Reddit, or turn to Ellen. Right? There's so many ways we try and repair what's wrong. We do our little tune-up here and there. Or we can do something else. We can make another choice instead. We can do like that child in the story, and we can open up the door of the cathedral of our life this very night to the towering genius and the wonderful goodness of the one who once came down from eternity and is coming again one day to renew his creation. We can ask God to come in and to let him teach us afresh how to play.